With Fallout Season 2 now coming to an end and all of the episodes being released, I thought it was about time I addressed the few issues that I had with this season of the show compared to the first. Season 2 took a slightly different approach to Season 1 in the way that they released the episodes, and I also feel like the way that the story was told felt a lot more congested and cluttered than what it did the first time round, ultimately leading to arcs that felt forgotten or like they were simply pushed to the side. Whilst it didn't necessarily impact the overall quality of the season, it just felt like there was a sense of disruption to the story. So with that, I wanted to address what I feel didn't work in this season of the show and explain why it made Season 2 just feel that little bit different. So let's get into it. Here is why Fallout Season 2 felt different. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. There were too many stories. My biggest issue with this season of the show is that I feel like there were way too many stories for its own good. When looking at it, at one point in the show, we had the flashback with Cooper in the present day as Ghoul, trying to find Barb and Janie, Lucy trying to find her father, Norm in the Vault Dweller's adventure, Hank developing the automated man technology, Vaults 32 and 33, Max and the Brotherhood, and also Thaddeus. There were way more stories going on in this season because the likes of Lucy had made it out of the vault, Norm was out of the vault too, and quite a lot of them were operating in silo. But with the way that the show was set out and structured and having 8 episodes which were released weekly, instead of the 8 episodes releasing in one go like they did in Season 1, I really did feel like I noticed the gaps in storylines when they'd occur. For example, Cooper and Lucy were a given in every episode, they're the main characters and they're the ones that we're the most interested in. But the likes of Norm, Vault 32 and 33, the disappearance of Woody, and Max and Thaddeus were just often left to the side and interchanged with one another, ultimately meaning that some would get left out in favour of the others. So when that would happen, it would then mean that there'd be a whole week without their story being addressed, which just bothered me slightly. Take Norm being found out to be an imposter. When he was choked out by Ronnie, that was the last time we saw him for well over an episode. Also, the Brotherhood too. A civil war was sparked by Max and Thaddeus in the first half of the season, and then we didn't pick up with them until the post-credits scene. This was never an issue in Season 1 of the show because even though there were less arcs, if it had the same amount, that emptiness wouldn't have been felt because you could watch through as many of the episodes in one go and you wouldn't be left waiting weeks to find out the answer on one tiny arc in one large show. I just think in having 8 episodes being released weekly, the show almost bit off too much for it to chew in being able to deliver quality arcs that got the appropriate amount of attention. Instead, stories were almost thrown to the wasteland, and I found myself not really caring about some, being bored within others, and just wanting to spend most of my time with Cooper and Lucy. Ultimately because they felt like the stories that got the most attention. Norm's story felt utterly pointless. Now, the fact that we saw that Steph was formerly married to Hank and that she initiated Phase 2 of the plan for Vaults 32 and 33 did redeem the story inside of the vaults, but it was definitely heading in a direction where it felt like it could have been unredeemable because it was a slow burn. But one thing I will say about the story in the vaults was what was the point in Reg's side quest of throwing his parties? I guess we'll never know. However, Norm's story, that was one that didn't really have any redeeming qualities. After thawing all of the Vault Dwellers, making out like he was Bud's successor and leading them astray, his story ultimately concluded with him deceiving them all, them being annihilated by the roaches, and him heading back towards the vault with Claudia. So he's basically going right back to square one without truly learning anything other than the fact that the forced evolutionary virus merely existed. I kind of felt underwhelmed with the way that his story concluded. I guess with Norm it could be seen as a personal level of growth with the way that he was out on the surface and that he finally found a sense of belonging and a wider purpose. Something that he lacked when he was inside of the vault, but for me it just didn't justify the screen time that he had, and the underwhelming nature of it just left me feeling a bit disappointed. Cooper's backstory was so much stronger than the other stories. One thing that made the show great, but I think ultimately went against it slightly, was all of the scenes with Cooper, Barb, and his story of him wanting to be the hero in the past, but slowly losing his humanity. Whereas in the present day, with him going to Vegas, he was gradually starting to regain some of the humanity that he lost, and it made for an interesting contrast. Within this season, I just found myself getting more oomph, emotion, and meaning from the story in the flashback scenes. There was almost this sense of relatability that I get with Cooper in seeing him struggling with his family, the moral decision he made to partner with Vault-Tec and being reminded of it everywhere he turned. And also him questioning if Barb was the wife that he married or if she was somebody that was now unrecognizable. Pair that with the modern day storyline where we were quite literally seeing a man that had been broken and didn't care who he killed, when in the past, all he wanted to do was save the people that were around him. We were then left with the pieces which showed us how he got to that point. Walton Goggins is definitely the best performer in the show, and the fact that his story was just so strong, entertaining, heart-wrenching, and emotionally evoking and interesting. When it came to many of the other arcs, I just found myself wanting to be back in this one. How big was the world? During the beginning of the season, I felt like the world felt quite expansive, and in seeing Lucy and Ghoul in this vast open landscape, and also Maximus and the Brotherhood in the desert, it made the environment feel far and wide. However, by the end of the season, it felt like the geography in the show just stopped mattering as much. The moment where it was confirmed for me was when Ghoul was pierced by the spike, was walked away by the mutant, and then out of the blue, when the time came, Dogmeat just ran away from him and found Max and Thaddeus like they were around the corner. It never really felt like Max and Thaddeus were in the proximity of Ghoul, so I just remember thinking that because of the episode count, it meant that it was more for convenience than anything else, which I thought was a bit of a shame. Robert House needed more. Robert House was this character that we were teased with throughout the entirety of this season. He was one of the first characters that we saw when the season opened, and even though we got some great moments with him in episode 5, I can't help but feel like he was a character that just didn't really actually amount to much. It felt like he spoke in riddles most of the time, and with him also insinuating that he didn't drop the bombs and not really providing much clarity on what his role is in all of this, rather than me being left wondering what his involvement was and what it all meant. I was just left feeling like he was this character that we never really reached the full potential with. I imagine in Season 3, when we inevitably have more flashbacks, we'll find out more about Robert House, but if he's going to be more important, I'd like him to have dedicated screen time and for it to not always necessarily just be riddles. Overall, when it comes to this season of the show, I did thoroughly enjoy it. I just think there were a few main things that I just couldn't help but notice as we were getting deeper into the episodes. Stories being put to the side, the less digestible nature compared to all of the episodes being released at once, and certain stories just feeling underbaked or not even worth throwing in the oven at all. I'm not slating the season because it was a good ride overall, and I absolutely loved watching Cooper's story in the past and present, and also Lucy with her looking to find her father, having to say goodbye to her father, and us questioning if the wasteland had transformed her into a killer. When looking forward to Season 3, it already feels like the stories are going to be easier to digest because there's not going to be as many floating around, so I don't think it'll feel crammed, so that might help if there's a weekly release. But for this show, if it's going to have a lot of stories to tell, I'd say just have one big drop with all of the episodes, maybe even treating us to 10 would be great. That's just my opinion anyway. So, there you have it, why Fallout Season 2 felt different. If you want to see more videos on Fallout Season 2, then check the playlist below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of Season 2? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.